Jimmy Kimmel. There are some names in the world of entertainment that seem to radiate laughter, warmth, and a sense of belonging. For millions of Americans, Jimmy Kimmel is one of those names. He's the late-night host who has made us laugh through the darkest times, the comedian who has turned awkwardness into art, and the everyman who somehow made it to the top of Hollywood's most exclusive club. But behind the jokes, the viral monologues, and the celebrity interviews, there is a story that few truly know, a story marked by heartbreak, struggle, and a quiet pain that fame could never erase. At 57, the tragedy of Jimmy Kimmel is not just a headline, it's a journey that reveals the cost of making the world laugh while carrying your own silent burdens. To understand the tragedy of Jimmy Kimmel, you have to look beyond the bright lights of the studio, the roar of the audience, and the carefully crafted persona that millions have come to love. You have to go back to a childhood in Brooklyn, New York, where Jimmy was born in 1967 to a working-class family. His father, James John Kimmel, was an IBM executive, and his mother, Joan, was a homemaker. The Kimmels were not wealthy, but they were close-knit, and laughter was the glue that held them together. Jimmy was the oldest of 3 children, and from an early age, he learned that humor could be a shield, a way to deflect pain, to win friends, to survive in a world that didn't always make sense. But childhood was not always easy. The family moved to Las Vegas when Jimmy was 9, a transition that left him feeling like an outsider. The glitz and glamour of the city were a far cry from the familiar streets of Brooklyn, and Jimmy struggled to find his place. He was a shy, awkward kid, more comfortable with books and drawing than with sports or parties. School was a challenge, not because he lacked intelligence, but because he was restless, distracted, always searching for something to make him feel at home. Teachers saw potential, but Jimmy saw only the distance between himself and the kids who seemed to fit in so easily. It was in these years that Jimmy discovered the power of comedy. He idolized David Letterman, staying up late to watch his irreverent humor and offbeat interviews. He began to dream of a life in show business, but the path was anything but clear. After high school, Jimmy attended the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and later Arizona State University, but he never graduated. Instead, he bounced from job to job, working in radio, drawing cartoons, and doing whatever he could to stay close to the world of entertainment. The road was long, the paycheck small, and the rejection constant. But Jimmy kept going, driven by a stubborn belief that laughter could open doors that seemed forever closed. His big break came in radio, where his quick wit and self-deprecating humor made him a local favorite. But even as his career began to take off, Jimmy's personal life was marked by uncertainty. He married his college sweetheart, Gina Maddie, and together they had 2 children. But the pressures of a fledgling career, the long hours, and the constant moves took their toll. The marriage ended in divorce, leaving Jimmy with a sense of failure that would haunt him for years. He loved his children deeply, but the guilt of not being able to keep his family together was a wound that never fully healed. As Jimmy transitioned from radio to television, first as the co-host of Win Ben Stein's Money, and later as the co-creator of The Man Show, his star began to rise. But with success came new challenges. The world of late-night television was cutthroat, and Jimmy often felt like an imposter among the legends he had grown up idolizing. The pressure to be funny, to be relevant, to be perfect, was relentless. Every joke was a risk, every monologue a test. The laughter of the audience was both a balm and a burden, a reminder that his worth was measured in punchlines, not in peace. As Jimmy Kimmel's career gained momentum, the world began to see him as a fixture of American comedy. A man who could make even the most uncomfortable topics feel approachable, who could turn celebrity interviews into moments of genuine connection. But behind the scenes, the pressure was mounting. When Jimmy Kimmel Live premiered in 2003, it was met with skepticism. The late-night landscape was dominated by giants like Jay Leno and David Letterman, and many doubted that Kimmel, with his unpolished style and irreverent humor, could survive. The first years were brutal. Ratings were low, critics were harsh, and Jimmy often wondered if he was in over his head. But Jimmy's resilience, honed through years of rejection and self-doubt, became his greatest asset. He refused to give up, working tirelessly to refine his show, to find his voice, to connect with an audience that was slow to embrace him. He surrounded himself with friends and collaborators who believed in him, people like Guillermo Rodriguez and Cousin Sal, who brought their own warmth and authenticity to the show. Slowly, the tide began to turn.
Jimmy Kimmel Live
Found its rhythm, and Jimmy's unique blend of sincerity and sarcasm began to resonate with viewers. The show became a late-night staple, and Jimmy, at last, felt a sense of belonging in a world that had always seemed just out of reach. Yet, even as his professional life flourished, Jimmy's personal life remained complicated. His divorce from Gina had left deep scars, and though he found love again with comedian Sarah Silverman, their relationship was marked by the same challenges that had haunted his first marriage: long hours, public scrutiny, and the ever-present demands of fame. When that relationship ended, Jimmy was once again left to pick up the pieces, to face the loneliness that so often accompanies success. He eventually found stability with Molly McNerney, a writer on his show, and together they built a new family. But the journey to happiness was anything but smooth. In 2017, Jimmy and Molly welcomed their son Billy into the world. What should have been a moment of pure joy quickly turned into a nightmare. Billy was born with a rare congenital heart defect and required open-heart surgery at just 3 days old. The experience was harrowing, a test of faith and endurance that left Jimmy and his family shaken to their core. For the first time, the world saw a different side of Jimmy Kimmel. Not the comedian, but the father, the man who wept openly on national television as he shared his son's story. His vulnerability struck a chord with millions, sparking a national conversation about healthcare and the struggles faced by families in crisis. But the pain of those days never fully faded. Jimmy has spoken candidly about the fear, the helplessness, and the guilt he felt as a parent unable to protect his child. The ordeal brought back memories of his own childhood anxieties, the sense of being powerless in the face of forces beyond his control. It also deepened his empathy, his understanding of the quiet battles that so many people fight every day. But it left scars, emotional wounds that lingered long after the cameras stopped rolling. The demands of late-night television are relentless. The schedule is punishing, the competition fierce, and the need to stay relevant never-ending. Jimmy has often joked about the toll the job takes on his health, but behind the humor is a deeper truth. The long hours, the stress, the constant pressure to perform have all taken their toll. He has struggled with insomnia, weight fluctuations, and the nagging fear that one misstep could bring everything crashing down. The laughter that once felt like salvation now sometimes feels like a mask. A way to hide the exhaustion, the anxiety, the sense that no amount of success can ever fill the void left by loss. Through it all, Jimmy Kimmel has continued to show up night after night, turning his pain into punchlines, his heartbreak into humor. But the tragedy of his story is that the world sees only the laughter, not the tears that fall in the quiet moments when the audience has gone home. As Jimmy Kimmel's public persona grew, so did the expectations placed upon him. He became not just a comedian but a cultural commentator, a voice that millions turn to in times of crisis, a late-night host unafraid to tackle the issues that others avoided. Whether it was politics, social justice, or the heartbreak of national tragedies, Jimmy found himself at the center of conversations that shaped the country. His monologues after mass shootings, his emotional pleas for healthcare reform, and his willingness to speak out on issues like immigration and gun violence set him apart from his peers. But with this new role came a new kind of pressure, one that weighed heavily on his heart and mind. The world saw a man who was fearless, but Jimmy often felt anything but. The responsibility of using his platform for good was immense, and the backlash was often swift and brutal. He received hate mail, threats, and criticism from those who disagreed with his views. The internet, once a place of connection, became a battleground. Every word, every joke, every opinion was dissected and debated. The laughter that had once been his refuge now felt precarious, as if it could be snatched away at any moment by a single misstep or misunderstood punchline. Jimmy's willingness to be vulnerable on air, whether talking about his son's health, his own struggles, or the pain of losing friends and colleagues, made him relatable to millions. But it also left him exposed. The more he shared, the more he felt the weight of expectation. People looked to him not just for entertainment, but for comfort, for guidance, for answers to questions that had no easy solutions. The burden of being America's conscience was one he never asked for, but one he could not escape. Behind the scenes, the toll was mounting. The relentless pace of late-night television left little time for rest or reflection. Jimmy's health became a growing concern. He battled sleep deprivation, stress-related ailments, and the constant anxiety that comes with live television. The pressure to stay relevant in an ever-changing media landscape was unrelenting. New competitors emerged, the audience's attention span shrank, and the world seemed to move faster with each passing year. Jimmy adapted, reinventing his show, embracing new formats, and finding ways to connect with younger viewers. But the effort was exhausting, and the fear of being left behind was never far from his mind. The personal losses continued to accumulate. Jimmy's relationship with his parents remained close, but he watched as they aged as time took its inevitable toll. Friends and mentors passed away, leaving him to grapple with the reality of mortality. The laughter that once filled his life now sometimes felt hollow, a reminder of all that had been lost. He worried about his children, about the world they would inherit, about whether he was doing enough to protect them from the pain he had known. Through it all, Jimmy clung to the things that mattered most. His family, his friends, his sense of humor. He found solace in the small moments: a quiet dinner at home, a walk with his children, a shared joke with a loved one. But even these joys were tinged with sadness, with the knowledge that nothing lasts forever. The tragedy of Jimmy Kimmel is not just in the pain he has endured, but in the realization that the very things that brought him happiness are also the things most vulnerable to loss. As he approached his late 50s, Jimmy began to reflect more deeply on his life and career. He wondered what it all meant, whether the laughter he had given the world was enough to balance the sorrow he carried inside. He questioned the choices he had made, the sacrifices he had accepted, the relationships he had let slip away in pursuit of a dream. The applause was still there, but it no longer drowned out the doubts. The spotlight was bright, but it cast long shadows. In the end, Jimmy Kimmel's story is one of resilience. A man who has faced heartbreak and hardship, who has turned pain into laughter, and who continues to show up night after night, even when the world feels heavy and hope seems far away. As Jimmy Kimmel moved deeper into his 50s, the world around him seemed to change at a dizzying pace. The late-night landscape, once a familiar playground, became a battleground of shifting loyalties and new faces. Social media transformed the way audiences consumed comedy, and the pressure to go viral to stay relevant became more intense than ever. Jimmy, who had once thrived on the slow burn of a well-crafted joke, now found himself racing against the clock, competing not just with other hosts, but with every meme, tweet, and trending video on the internet. The laughter was still there, but it was fleeting, replaced by the relentless demand for something new, something bigger, something that would break through the noise. The weight of these changes was not just professional, it was deeply personal. Jimmy's sense of identity, so long tied to his role as a late-night host, began to feel uncertain. He wondered if he was still the same man who had started out in radio, hungry for a chance to make people laugh. The world's expectations had become a double-edged sword. On one hand, they validated his success; on the other, they made every misstep feel catastrophic. The fear of cancellation, of being misunderstood or out of touch, haunted him. He watched as colleagues and friends faced public backlash, their careers derailed by a single comment or a joke taken out of context. The safety net that had once protected comedians seemed to have vanished, replaced by a culture that demanded perfection and punished vulnerability. At home, the challenges were just as real. Jimmy's family remained his anchor, but the demands of his career often kept him away from the moments that mattered most. He missed school plays, family dinners, and quiet evenings with his wife and children. The guilt of absence weighed heavily on him, a constant reminder that success in one arena often comes at the expense of another. He tried to make up for lost time, to be present when he could, but the balance was elusive. The tragedy of Jimmy Kimmel is that the very thing that brought him joy, making people laugh, sometimes kept him from the people he loved most. Health concerns continued to shadow his days. The stress of live television, the late nights, the constant scrutiny all took their toll. Jimmy spoke openly about his struggles with insomnia, his battles with weight, and the anxiety that sometimes made it hard to breathe. He joked about his ailments on air, turning his pain into punchlines, but behind the humor was a deeper truth. The body, like the spirit, can only endure so much. The years of pushing himself, of ignoring warning signs, began to catch up with him. Doctors' visits became more frequent, and the reality of aging set in. The man who had once seemed invincible now faced the same fears and frailties as everyone else. Yet, through it all, Jimmy's compassion never wavered. He used his platform to advocate for causes close to his heart, from children's health to disaster relief. He raised millions for charity, lent his voice to those in need, and never shied away from sharing his own struggles in the hope that it might help someone else. His vulnerability became his strength, a bridge that connected him to his audience in ways that went far beyond laughter. But the more he gave, the more he felt the weight of expectation. The world looked to him for comfort, for guidance, for hope, and Jimmy, ever the everyman, sometimes wondered if he was enough. As he neared his 57th birthday, Jimmy Kimmel found himself at a crossroads. The applause was still loud, the spotlight still bright, but the questions grew louder. Was it all worth it? Had he given enough? Had he been a good father, a good husband, a good friend? The answers were elusive, lost in the noise of a world that never stops moving. The tragedy of Jimmy Kimmel is not just in the pain he has endured, but in the uncertainty that lingers. The sense that, no matter how much he gives, it may never be enough to fill the spaces left by loss. As Jimmy Kimmel approached his late 50s, the reflections grew deeper, the nights longer, and the questions more persistent. The world still saw him as the affable host, the man who could make even the most stoic celebrity crack a smile. But inside, Jimmy was wrestling with the realities of aging, legacy, and the meaning of it all. The laughter that once came so easily now sometimes felt like a distant echo, a reminder of a simpler time when the stakes were lower and the world seemed full of possibility. The loss of friends and mentors weighed heavily on him. The entertainment industry, for all its glitz and glamour, is a place of constant change. People come and go, careers rise and fall, and the bonds that once seemed unbreakable can fade with time and distance. Jimmy watched as colleagues retired, as others were taken too soon by illness or tragedy. Each loss was a reminder of his own mortality, of the fleeting nature of fame, and of the importance of cherishing the moments that matter. He became more protective of his inner circle, valuing authenticity over popularity, and seeking comfort in the company of those who truly understood him. His relationship with his children became a source of both joy and heartache. He wanted to be the father who was always there, the dad who showed up for every milestone, every heartbreak, every triumph. But the demands of his career often pulled him away, leaving him to wonder if he was doing enough, if his children would remember him for his presence or his absence. He tried to make up for lost time, to create memories that would last, but the guilt of missed moments lingered. The tragedy of Jimmy Kimmel is that, for all his success, he could not escape the universal pain of wanting to be everything to everyone, and knowing that it's impossible. Jimmy's marriage to Molly became a partnership built on understanding and resilience. She knew the pressures he faced, the toll that fame and responsibility could take, and she stood by him through every storm. Their love was not the stuff of fairy tales but of real life, messy, complicated, and fiercely loyal. Together, they navigated the challenges of raising a family in the public eye, of balancing ambition with intimacy, of finding laughter in the midst of chaos. But even the strongest relationships are tested by time, and Jimmy often wondered if he was giving enough, if he was truly present in the moments that mattered most. Professionally, Jimmy continued to push boundaries, to use his platform for good, to speak out on issues that mattered. But the cost of being a public figure was higher than ever. Every opinion was scrutinized, every joke analyzed, every misstep amplified. The fear of saying the wrong thing, of being misunderstood, of losing everything he had worked for, was a constant companion. The world demanded authenticity but punished imperfection. Jimmy walked a tightrope, balancing honesty with caution, vulnerability with self-protection. As he looked back on his journey, Jimmy saw a life marked by both triumph and tragedy. He had achieved more than he ever dreamed possible, but the price had been steep. The latter he gave the world was real, but so was the pain he carried in private. The applause was intoxicating, but it could not fill the emptiness left by loss, by regret, by the knowledge that some wounds never fully heal. Yet, in the midst of it all, Jimmy found moments of grace. He learned to appreciate the small victories: a heartfelt conversation with a guest, a genuine laugh from his children, a quiet evening at home. He discovered that true happiness was not found in the spotlight, but in the connections he made, the lives he touched, the love he gave and received. The tragedy of Jimmy Kimmel is not that he failed, but that he succeeded beyond his wildest dreams and still found himself searching for meaning, for peace, for a sense of belonging in a world that never stops demanding more. As Jimmy Kimmel stands at 57, the world sees a man who has become a fixture in American culture. A late-night host whose wit, warmth, and candor have made him a household name. But behind the laughter, the viral moments, and the celebrity interviews, there is a quieter, more complex story. A story of resilience, vulnerability, and the bittersweet reality of a life lived in the spotlight. The tragedy of Jimmy Kimmel is not found in a single event or headline, but in the accumulation of moments, of joy and sorrow, of triumph and regret, that have shaped him into the man he is today. In recent years, Jimmy has become more reflective, more willing to share the lessons he's learned and the pain he's endured. He has spoken openly about his struggles with anxiety, about the sleepless nights spent worrying about his family, his health, and the future of his career. He has admitted to moments of doubt, of wondering whether he has done enough, whether the laughter he has given the world is enough to balance the heartbreak he has carried in private. The world sees him as unbreakable, but Jimmy knows that true strength is not the absence of pain, but the courage to keep moving forward in spite of it. His legacy is undeniable. He has changed the landscape of late-night television, using his platform to address issues that matter, to comfort those in pain, and to bring people together in moments of national crisis. He has raised millions for charity, given a voice to the voiceless, and inspired countless others to use humor as a force for good. But the true measure of his impact is not found in ratings or awards, but in the quiet moments when someone finds comfort in his words, when a family feels less alone because he dared to share his own struggles. Jimmy's greatest gift has always been his ability to connect, to make people feel seen, heard, and understood. Yet, the irony is that the man who made the world laugh has often felt the most alone. As he looks to the future, Jimmy is learning to embrace the peace he once thought was out of reach. He spends more time with his family, cherishing the simple joys of fatherhood, marriage, and friendship. He meditates, practices gratitude, and finds solace in the small moments. A shared meal, a walk in the park, the sound of his children's laughter. The show goes on, but the spotlight is no longer the only source of fulfillment. He has learned at last that true happiness is not found in applause, but in acceptance, in the ability to forgive himself for his mistakes, to let go of the need to be perfect, and to find meaning in the love he gives and receives. Still, the shadows linger. The losses cannot be undone, the wounds cannot be erased. The tragedy of Jimmy Kimmel is that he has given so much, and yet, like all of us, he must face the reality of aging, of saying goodbye, of letting go. He has spoken about his fears, the fear of being forgotten, the fear of not having done enough, the fear that his story will be reduced to punchlines and sound bites. But he also knows that his life is a testament to resilience, to the power of vulnerability, to the beauty of rising again and again, no matter how many times the world tries to break you. For his fans, Jimmy remains a beacon, a reminder that it is possible to overcome, to heal, to find meaning in the midst of suffering. For himself, he is learning to be gentle, to forgive, to let go of the need to be everything to everyone. He is at 57, both a legend and a man, both triumphant and tragic, both whole and wounded. His story is not just about what he has achieved, but about what he has survived, about the courage it takes to keep loving, keep giving, keep hoping even when the world feels cold and indifferent. As you reflect on the life of Jimmy Kimmel, ask yourself, what does it mean to be truly strong? Is it the ability to make the world laugh, or the willingness to face your own heartache with honesty and grace? Jimmy's journey shows us that the greatest tragedy is not in falling, but in never daring to rise. And in his rise again and again we find not just the story of a superstar, but the story of what it means to be human.